an interactive session. We're going to come down to everybody's level. None of this pedestal thing, panelists telling you how it's done. You're going to tell us how it's done. But I'll let my co-speaker introduce herself and get us started because she's much better at hacking than everyone else.
I'm not sure about that, but I'll do my best. Okay, my name is Vanessa. I'm the director of program of the Mortis Foundation in Northern Estonia. We cooperate with Open Data Kosovo extensively in many projects, and today I was invited to speak to you about our cooperation with the government in the last 3 years. I'm sure I don't have anything original to tell you, considering that you probably have as much experience working with different stakeholders. But I will share our experience, and then, like George said, this is an interactive session, and we hope to hear from you as well on your part of the business and how you do what you do. Basically, in the last 3 years, the Mortis Foundation has been engaged closely with the government on the development of the strategy on open data and the strategy on transparency. So we work with the General Secretariat of the government and Ministry of Information Society and Administration. The approach has been different in both situations. We have either been approached or we have pushed for these changes, and then we impose our seat on the table in these processes. But in general, what I want to say is a couple of things on how I see what are the preconditions on how to, make an environment that allows for a sustainable and good cooperation with the government in particular. And I think it's important to start with the context. In Denmark for some reason. In North Macedonia, as you probably know very well, we had a decade of a very dark political period when civil society was either symbolically engaged, I wouldn't say engaged, symbolically present in the processes, or absent completely. So the role of the civil society was either as watchdogs, complaining and criticizing, but never given a seat on the table. And when they did get that seat on the table, it was usually just abused for PR of the government. So during that period, we had absolutely no access to processes. But then in 2016, with the new elections, we went into another extreme. The government started hiring people from the civil society as advisors, and many ministers appointed from civil society. There was even an excuse by the Prime Minister as soon as he took office, saying that he expects people to understand why he's doing this, because there is much expertise in the civil society that they lack at the government, and the state needs it. So it's public service calling, and he needs that. It was a statement that really did, in a way, recognize their interest and their will to absorb what the civil society had to say. And not only this, but all working groups started opening up for many strategies, new laws, and all processes that organizations with more portfolios at this stage now complain that they can't keep up with all the processes and all the events that they're invited to give their contribution. So as I said, we're going from one extreme to another extreme. And I'm not saying that this is a very thorough approach or a systematic approach, but they do tend to invite civil society more. We lack the register of CSOs where they register about the events and the topics that they would like to be consulted on. So we have a systematic approach that we know whose work focuses on what and that they're interested in participating in this process. But they do send massive ad hoc invitations to civil society on selected issues. So this is for me to say that the context is very important for us to engage with the government. There has to be an expression of will for this cooperation so that it's fruitful, and that whatever we do and whatever we contribute stays with the government, and then the society can see the benefits of it. It's a precondition that we have to mention. Second, and I think the most important, is the approach to this cooperation. Usually, there are cases when, as I said, we are approached and we're asked for support, and there are cases where we impose ourselves in these processes. And this is less important than how we do the work we do once we agree on a partnership. So, in Macedonia, and correct me if that's not the case in Kosovo, but in Macedonia there are many cases where civil society have approached them, they're asked for help. Like, hey, I know you do pretty well with open data, you have an expertise in this area, help us start a strategy on this. We would like to have a strategy on how to open up government data. And I said, yeah, sure, let's do that. But once you agree to that, I wouldn't say it could be lack of political will, it could be lack of expertise, but even lack of resources. But without resources, you won't be able to implement it further. So what happens is we sign up for this partnership and then we take over completely everything that has to be done for this document and this policy to be developed. So we go from having a situation analysis, we hold the consultations, we coordinate the working group, we write down the documents, we print it and we design it for them, and then we do all of it, and then when it's done and ready to go, we give it up to them, and we feel that at this stage there is no ownership of the document, and that's why implementation usually stops, and there are many problems on the way of implementing such beautiful strategies that we write. And I'm sure I've heard the same about Kosovo, that you as well as Macedonia, we have excellent laws, excellent strategies on paper, but when it comes to implementing them, we really have a big problem. So ownership is a big problem. We have to really find the way we approach government, the type of help we offer to the government in this sense. We either have to limit it or condition it, then we offer half of the help, be it expertise or something else, and then we expect that they contribute themselves to this process for the most part. So they have ownership of it, and we're only helping, we're not doing it. This is a lesson learned in our experience that we have to consider in the future. And the second one is a realistic situation analysis. And we as civil society, we use and abuse every opportunity to advocate for new and ambitious policies for the government. And of course, in such settings, we insist that it would be best if you do this. And so what is normal is to expect the government will be negotiating on these things based on a realistic situation analysis of their capacity to implement these things and take them on board. But we don't do that because they also like the idea of having these beautiful documents and ambitions that they can bring on elsewhere. So we end up with documents, like I said, that look very beautiful, but are not based on a realistic situation analysis. They're too ambitious for us to implement, and we boast about the quality. And that's not what I came here to do today, but both strategies are beautiful. So we boast about these good quality policies that we have problems implementing as we go on, due to the lack of ownership and because we often build them up on the wrong ideas of capacities of to implement. And the third one I would insist is that even the most important one is that when we offer such help to institutions with the whole process, and I say help because we do more than we would normally offer if we just for consultations and expertise. Is always insisting that they have a monitoring, evaluation, and learning framework for the policies that we make. It would help us as civil society as well as the institutions to learn from the mistakes, from all these things that I just mentioned about what went wrong, as well as document the things that go well, and then based on those build up on how to take it further from there. So it's basically these are the 3 lessons learned from our cooperation with the government with these 2 documents in the last 3 years. And I wouldn't like to take much of the time. I'll pass the mic to Georges now, and then hopefully we'll hear more from your experiences. It doesn't have to be the government. I think it's any stakeholder that you work with and what's your approach that you adopt to having a sustainable cooperation.
Thanks so much. I got my middle mic here. Special treatment. So I'm going to give a story or give my experience based on what I've been through, which was working in building Open Data Kosovo in its early stage. Open Data Kosovo, a great success story. Of course, it has to do with the people who worked on it and the leadership. That goes without saying. But also, what is not really appreciated or seen a lot behind all of these, in fact, all of these results are the collaborations we have. And when I think about how we built these collaborations, the one thing that comes to my mind is compromise. And maybe in the later exercise, I'd like you guys to tell me what you understand compromise to be like, and I'll tell you what my definition of compromise is. For me, compromise is nobody getting what they actually wanted, but still being happy in the end. And it's very tough, especially if you have strong, unnegotiable values, that you're just not made for collaboration. And maybe that's your thing because your work is individual. But I come from a systems engineer background where you quickly understand that if you want to build great things, like sending someone on the moon, you have to collaborate with a lot of people, a lot of actors, and you need to become friends. And the only thing you can rely on is the other person's professionalism and commitment to deliver something great for the greater good. And in the end, everybody pushes for result despite the initial requirements not being satisfied. This, I think, is very important, compromise. And I'll give you one example that we worked on early stage when I was still very much involved day-to-day with the Kosovo. We started off with procurements. And I remember we had this idealistic idea of procurement transparency. And then we quickly understood that you can't sell the idea of transparency and accountability to, you can't necessarily sell that to politicians. Like, hey, Mr. Mayor X, how do you want to be accountable so everybody can see what's wrong with your municipality? It's like, no, I don't want that. Like, I know I'm trying to fix this, but I don't want this bad reputation, so why would I sign up for it? So quickly, we engaged in something which I would always call, it was called realpolitik transparency, where you identify everybody's actual motivation, but not only motivation is what do they have to gain in terms of collaborating in this initiative. And for procurements, we had 4 actors. We had local government, meaning municipalities and mayors. We had civil society, meaning us and our partners of the Kosovo. We had the donors, and then we had the participants, which were students that we were teaching on how to process data and open data. And everybody had a separate reason in order to be involved in this. None of them, except for civil society, was directly tied to promoting transparency. Right? Government, municipality wanted to have this profile or association of good governance and accountability purely for political points and like knocking out some checks on transparency goals and whatnot to have a good image of anti-corruption activities. They weren't necessarily interested in understanding how all of this works and whatnot. That's okay, you drive them in with that interest and then you elaborate it with them. Students, they just wanted to learn how to apply their coding skills, or they just wanted to learn how to code. You could have given them other data that has nothing to do with government spending. They would have come for the same reason, because for them it was skill development and learning. So for us, okay, we're going to focus on teaching these skills that they need for the private sector when they start looking for jobs. But it just so happens that the product is going to be contributing to transparency. Donors, they wanted to see value for their money, impact. So they wanted to see results. And us as civil society and the partners, we wanted to see transparency initiatives growing and fruitfully being bearing some fruitful results. So it was trying to find the overlap on all of this interest, that even though people had separate motivations, they still collaborated together because they still had their own personal objectives, which is okay. It's okay that your own objectives do not align with other people, but there's no reason why some aspect of it cannot overlap with everybody. And you want the holy Venn diagram, where all the circles have some middle part, and that middle part is whatever policy change you're trying to push or whatever initiative. And what's great about this collaborative overlap is, what I think is overlooked a lot, is the exchange of knowledge and the exchange of skills that happens, the exposure. And I'm gonna put someone on the spotlight here who came completely unprepared and doesn't want to be mentioned. Martin was one of our students in the first year, yeah. So he was one of the students, but with a lot of responsibility that was given to him in like mentoring other students on how to process data. So I taught him a few tricks, and then I said, you have to repeat this to all of the other students so they get to learn this. And then he was working with procurement data, and then because he had to interact with mayors and the municipality, suddenly he was being invited for consultancy on red flags to detect procurement, procurement mismatch and procurement data. And this is something he just learned out of just coding with the procurement data. It's not something he had set out to do, but because he was exposed to it for his own interest in developing skills, it's something he became able to talk about, and he knew how to operate in the government environment. And then suddenly you also have people in administration in there who just so happen to now know a little bit about what this whole coding thing is, what this whole open data is, what this whole technology is, other than their not developed image of like a geek with like maybe a hoodie behind his computer and doing that. And that overlap, I think, is the most important thing when you do collaborations. You don't say, this is what I do, I'm going to do this is none of your business. All you need to know is that I'm going to feed you this information, and you have to do whatever you want with it. No, you need to really create that overlap to force people or your partners to just learn, an overview or an understanding of what you do. And then you see that our former partners, they start working with other people that they wouldn't have been able to work with, but now that they know kind of how that world works, it opens up opportunities for them for further collaboration. Which I think is a great way to scale. When you're creating partnerships, it's not just for yourself, but it's for future networks to be expanded. I think I've talked enough about this specific example, but maybe we can start hearing from you guys, like, what do you think compromise is? Well, what do you think? Do you think there should be any limits to your compromise, your willingness to compromise for the sake of the project? So anyone, please just give some idea of what your concept of compromise is in terms of building collaboration.
My favorite question, because we don't like. We don't like to compromise, but we have to. But you will have to always stay your ground, because we know that we're working with a very new and challenging field, and it seems like sometimes if you compromise in some level, it depends on what you are talking about, but there are like limitations on what you should compromise, because you might not reach like the goals that you are setting to. Like, for example, earlier this morning we heard the deputy mayor talking about how we did the platform and how we sat together and talked for a while and had a couple of meetings to compromise each other's priorities, because we know that technology cannot fix everything. Like, it cannot do all of the human works that in this public institution. So we have to set some priorities that we need right now in order to achieve what we want, but still to make sense. To have an impact and to have some results in the end. So we should compromise at the level that we don't disrupt the quality of our work and the goals that we are trying to achieve.
Someone over there has a comment. And I would add to that the more you compromise, or the more you're experienced at compromising, the more you're able to design projects that will take into account compromise that's going to happen. You become this expert on what people are going to want and how you're not going to be able to deliver it. So what you have to propose in order to make everybody happy.
I would take the liberty to propose some of the things the previous participants said. Compromise involves not only to stand your ground, but to honor your values. And if you're fighting for the values, then you're doing the right thing, I would say. As you've said, that's an excellent definition of a compromise. As you know, Macedonia, now North Macedonia, and Greece achieved a great compromise that helped appease for a moment the situation in the Balkans. And I think that's a positive example that should be followed in many, even everyday ephemeral situation. You always have to give up something, but that way you'll give yourself a great present. I don't know if I was clear.
No, I think what you raise is a really good point. It's not because you're giving up a requirement that you're giving up on your values. This is a clear distinction, but a lot of people tend to too closely associate it together. So you, and then afterwards, I think.
Hello everyone, I would like to also add something. So, in order to reach a decision, there's means and there's the outcome of the decision. And in compromising with different stakeholders, I believe that we should compromise in the means of that decision and not the outcome. So the outcome should remain unchanged, but the means towards that outcome should be compromised. By that, it could be either understood as the power of language, what words do we use, what interests are our target audience, and how do we formulate it in a way that the target audience benefits from the specific interests we want them to benefit, and then deliver the solution we want to deliver or the product we highly believe in. And that's what I think we should do, not compromise on the outcome, but compromise on the means towards that outcome.
A lot of times this is the discussion at the end of the project that's had with donors, where something is produced and in the end it didn't work out. Like it wasn't sustained, there wasn't enough usage of it, and a lot of times they fail to appreciate the process that occurred to produce that product and that outcome, and all of the positive externalities that came out of it. Like so much of the activities that Open Data Kosovo does relates to training youth on how to use technology to process information. Okay, maybe the platform that was developed ends up in the platform graveyard, but in the process of building that platform, you've developed this community and these skills that in the end, you've increased employability, which is a huge problem here. And this is something that should be appreciated. Even though it's a positive externality and wasn't the top priority, you need to appreciate more of what you can achieve with the process rather than the goal itself. It's a good that you brought this up. Because unfortunately, sometimes donors just want to see the sign-up sheets. And you're like, how come not many people came and whatnot? But yeah. I don't know if you wanted to add something to this.
I just want to underline some things that's being told. I mean, I don't have any arguments which is against the things that are being told. I think that the most important thing is also for us to understand that good collaboration hurts. I mean, this is the part of the compromise following your definition, basically. And especially in the open data movement, I mean, we have to be open also about the interest that we're bringing on the table. What the starting point with collaborating with government, I will just make a sign on this later, but being open about our own interest and the outcome we want to achieve. And do it in the honest way. And sometimes, I mean, this is also the part of this good collaboration hurts thing, because not necessarily at the beginning we're sure about what we want to achieve. And this is very important in terms of the compromise, how we, as a civil society, and the representative of government, understand what the outcome is. But I think we should be also aware that this collaboration hurts. I would just want to underline it several times, because this is not an easy process. I mean, this is something that we have to bear in mind for different reasons. The other thing I just want to put maybe at the back of this main discussion is also the importance of actually supporting governments, or not governments, but like certain public officials, because at the end of the day, we're not working with governments, we're working with human beings in the government. And very often, from my perspective, we're working with those people who we can call reformers within government. And their situation within the public office is actually very often, I mean, not enthusiastically perceived by their bosses or by other public officials. And also like this collaboration in the terms of supporting these people is important, that they also see that there's an external world that think that their motivation is good, their readiness to implement some changes should be supported by the civil society, and very often they're very alone within their own offices. So I would also treat the collaboration as making them stronger in within the, maybe we will not have an outcome, but they will feel, and this is maybe the part of compromise, they will feel that their work within the office makes sense. And I think this is part of seeing not the government, not the public official, but a human being.
Organization have very strong personalities behind that success. And if your organization is going somewhere and successful, it's likely you also have a strong personality. And when you have to collaborate with someone else who has a strong personality, then it can become very stressful, very difficult, and tears can happen. But the strongest personalities are the ones who can overcome that and build something together. I always say that Pina and Beta are power duo because they're able to argue and come up with a joint compromise every time. And I think that just adds to the quality of the work because all the bases are covered and a realistic option is selected. And this is very true in between different organizations. Again, especially civil society. To do the job you're doing, to deal with the crap you have to deal with, you have to have a very strong personality. To your second point, I would add to that sometimes the best collaboration you can create is one that you're not even involved in. That you have a network, and there's no reason why you have to be involved in every single initiative that you're able to see a potential to create. I've had tremendous pleasure seeing successful projects go just because I saw some potential and introduced the right people to each other, or introduced some concept to other people, and they just build it themselves. Sometimes, you're there to trigger something, but the best thing you can do is just leave afterwards. And you don't have to always be involved, right? But this is also something people tend to be very sensitive about because it was my original idea. I can't believe they didn't put my logo on the banner. I'm the one who introduced it. No, that's a very toxic behavior. That doesn't create any successful collaboration. If you are a true soldier of what you believe in, then you're happy not only on how you get involved, but in the results that come out in the field that you're passionate about.
Nothing new to add, just to echo what you said previously, that most of the work we do, the good work we do, the government happens with the reforms in the institution. And it does depend really. Because I was speaking particularly about two strategies that we work for them, with them. In that situation, it's a policy level intervention that you would need political will as well to implement. It's not just working with the reformers. There's very little they can do if this is not indicated across the government and across all the 19 ministries and the like. But we will work particularly by, if we work particularly with one institution, that's usually the case. We have our contact points in all these places that we work with, enthusiastic as much as we are, and they do learn from us as much as we learn from them about the context and the best way to approach it. Very recently, and I keep mentioning this example, I don't know if I've met any of you that actually told this example before. We, 1 month ago, we were asked to hold a training on cybersecurity. And this was an activity that was planned with the National Action Plan for Cybersecurity. It was a training for children, for students, parents, and teachers. And we were approached by one of those reformers in the government that we worked with, and she asked for help. We have the expertise and we don't have the money. Can you help us out? We need to have this training with these target groups. And we said yes. But then you have the Bureau for Development of Education. So they have to approve the content of the training, and they weren't being very collaborative. They were actually stopping us all the way, finding little details about what's wrong. And we were doing this for free, and it was during November when we were the busiest ever, also organizing our annual conference. And but this girl, she managed to mediate the whole situation back and forth, and she played, every time we would get upset and say, I'm not doing this, I don't know why I'm in this situation at all. She would make sure that, she would put us back on the table. And this training did happen. We dedicated 5 trainers to this event, like I said, for free on the busiest period of the year. And the training did happen, only because there was someone in the administration that insisted that this has to happen. Regardless if you guys like each other, or if you agree this has to happen, it did happen. And we are very grateful for such
least it can generate some conversation.
Hi, so it's a very interesting panel. I'm glad that everyone is taking part in it. I'm just thinking that, you know, once we establish that compromise is hard and it is beneficial in the end, but it's hard to get there. I'm wondering if you have any tips on the formal process of how to get that, because, you know, the first step is probably like trying to understand your key values that you want to sort of progress with, but also what you can compromise on, to understand the other party's values and perspectives. And do you have any, like from your experience, ways of doing this, or you know, optimizing the process of getting to a compromise?
So, for me, it's a tough question to answer, because it's like asking, okay, could you provide us a guideline for leadership in social engineering? It's kind of an art.
Yeah.
Like it's a painful art where you navigate through the wave of people's emotions and have this personality that people are able to work with you, and you're able to set your pride aside and figure out what's best for the project. How do we teach leadership? How do we teach working with other people, working interdisciplinary? I think a lot of it has to do with experience. A lot of it has to do with being put in a leadership position where nobody else can do it, or nobody else wants to do it, but you have values and you want to see it happen, so you improvise in it, and you're gaining experience along the way. I honestly believe that people are well-intentioned, and it's just a matter of having the patience and drive and the thick skin of having to deal with a lot of disappointment before everybody can come together, and just because they're maybe tired of arguing, they go, okay, let's do it. You know? I know it's not an answer, but it's very difficult to provide a guideline, and I would say a lot of it has to do with experience. Some people are just born with it. Some people develop it because they just don't have a choice. But what I think is important is to at least expose yourself to the challenge. I don't know about you.
Because I have these two concrete examples.
You want the other one?
Because I have these two documents in mind, particularly it's easier for me to speak on these topics. So really, we sugarcoat it. That's what we do. We look at what their interest is in this and what's our state interest is. So it's, you know, public interest is always the first reference, and it's interest both sides in it. With the strategy and transparency, we continuously pointed out the low trust of the citizens of the government, and then how it would improve, you know, if you open up documents, information, and also processes for people to participate and contribute, and then what, you know, how that all ends up with trust in the government and the quality of the policy that we implement. So nobody's hurt. It's for the best interest of everyone, and I think that's the employee.
Say based on experience. This is why it's important for you to polish your work and the output you deliver, because people will want to work with you if you are reliable and dependable and you produce output. I remember tough times in the early life of over there. So I always remember one thing Martin told me. He told me, and it was like some drama. I forgot what the drama was, but I remember what Martin told me. He said, "We will speak with our work."
Yeah.
And it was exactly that. We delivered fantastic work, and then people wanted to work with us because they knew we had values. That they knew we were willing to compromise, but we had strong values, and that we produced quality work. You know, I said leadership, I said social engineering, and also charisma, but there's also professionalism, which is very important. Nobody wants to work with people that creates more work for them. People want to work, more work going behind. People want to work with you to create more work for going forward. So it's a mix of all these values, of what makes you a decent human being that people want to work with.
Hello. First of all, one of about to say, my views are personal and not of my employer. And
Who's your employer?
doesn't matter. On civil society in Kosovo. Since I implement a portfolio that works with civil society, I'm actually quite familiar with the topic. We have, the latest that I checked, 8,154 civil society organizations registered in Kosovo. The reason for this list being so big for such a small region is because I don't think it's even allowed with the law, or it's very complicated with the law to shut down an NGO that is non-operational. So we end up with this very big list of NGOs, and then the question is how many of them are actually active. And by activity, I personally mean that if you have an office, if you have a team, if you have ongoing projects, and if I call you and somebody can actually answer the phone or replies to the email, for me that's being active in the sense, or if you go out, have projects and you're doing the work. A lot of people don't agree with me. They say, okay, also if you're sort of like pausing between projects and so on, but then resuming and so on, so that's some sort of an activity as well, and whatever. In terms of how CSOs are operating right now in Kosovo, there are two things. One is that you can operate like Open Data Kosovo is operating now, whereby you create a product and you have made yourself a factor in a certain field and you have your own values, so you're respected for the work that you do. However, a lot of the, and this is a positive approach of approaching the general population and so on, and donors and so on. But there is also another aspect which we are forgetting and we're not talking enough. For example, it's the winter season now, and I have seen 0 protests on the street from environmental NGOs. And you've been here for a couple of days in the evening and also in the afternoon, you cannot even breathe here from the air. So the question is, these other NGOs that are supposed to go out and factorize themselves through protesting and actually asking for some sort of an accountability or responsibility, my question is, where are they? Because all of them have switched their activity into virtual activity by retweeting each other's posts. So this is unacceptable at this point, I think. In terms of compromising, I think if you're a factor, if you're already factorized, for example, like Open Data is, and if you play a little bit also strategically, you raise the bar a little bit too high in the beginning of the negotiations in order to get where you want throughout compromising and so on. I think in this case it's also logical to compromise because you know where you are, you know where you stand, and you know what you want. So practically speaking, in your case, you have the liberty of choice. Because if you compromise with a donor, let's say, that doesn't work out, okay, probably the other donor will come, so you have the liberty to choose which project do you want to get involved in. So what I'm trying to say is that unless other civil society organizations go out and factorize themselves, they will not have the liberty of choice to choose with whom do they want to collaborate that makes sense for them in that regard. So this is my overview, and again, I posted something on LinkedIn last night. It's not by accident that this organization is successful. I have not seen executive directors or policy directors working half an hour before midnight to set up the room and so on. I've worked for a lot of people. This is the first time that I see this, and I want to congratulate you for not only this event, but for other projects as well that Paulina presented regarding the employment and so on, in Sirius and many, many other things. Because it's not by accident that you're actually doing good work. And you're in the position to choose. Never forget that. Thank you.
I'm only the founder, but people who actually do the stuff are here in front. So thank you.
Back.
In the back. I would like to add a comment to what you said about this event in December. I remember when I was contacted if I could contribute to this. And I saw it was happening in December. The first thing I saw was, oh, catastrophe. Our panelists are going to have such a bad impression about Pristina and Kosovo because of the pollution, and they're going to think it's terrible and whatnot. And then I started thinking about it. It's like, no, people need to see this. Like, you don't create all of your international events in the convenient time slot where we can ignore all the bad things that are happening. People need to witness it. You need to taste the air. You tasted the air, right? It's a problem. And you don't have to, you should not hide it. And if anything related to environment, one of this should be the peak season for activity. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Maybe George can add on that.
Thank you. Maybe you can add an initiative that we took like years ago. Actually, I just started working with open data when we had to work with the Ministry of Spatial and Environment to see the stationery that were working, and we were not allowed somehow the inequality stations, and somehow we were asked to kind of provide these data, and for some reason their computers were not working, so basically shutting down time to time. And this was not even a thing, because just like suddenly US Embassy brought it up, and everybody like became aware of this. But we kind of we just wanted people to kind of know where do we stand in this regard. But definitely it's a thing, and definitely organizations that do promote and for the climate changes and environmental issues, they should go ahead and they should talk about this. It's really crucial. Yeah.
What's even more upsetting, now that I think better of it, is that in the last elections, when I went to vote, I was queuing. And I asked my family member, I said, why are we queuing? We never queued. He said, well, it must be a rearrangement of the last names or something. I said, okay, yeah, okay, let's queue. So we queued, and I said, no, something happened here in this neighborhood. Either the neighborhood grew, or something has happened, or they merged us with somebody else, because I remember here voting for years, this has never been the case. And it turns out at 3 o'clock when the statistics came out, that this year, for the last election that we had, the number of people that have shown up at 3 o'clock to vote was higher than 217 and 214, like from the previous two elections. And then at 9 o'clock, when the other statistics came, again, then the numbers were peaking and so on. So, so I was surprised for two things. Number one, so we know how to do it, like we know how to vote, because as you know, the position went completely in opposition this time, and the opposition gave two positions, so it's a major switch. So we know how to vote, and plus we're here, because we've been told that everybody is migrating and nobody's here. So we're here, so we know how to do it. And I think we should do it more often, like for everything.
How are you with time? That's what I'm right, all nighter. We're gonna solve all problems tonight. No trap doors. Comment over there in the back.
Question?
Question. Oh.
So my question for you two guys is about other stakeholders, not only government entities. What about journalists? What about other stakeholders involved in the process of delivering different products or services by civil society organizations? Let that be, saying again, not only government entities, but citizens and all others who are part of the process.
Yeah. Okay, so you wanted to corner us with the last question. You just brought up journalists, and I was thinking we have amazing cooperation with journalists, and we have recently started working with Generation Z, as we call them. Not our invention here. Through media projects, we're trying to target Generation Z with content that might interest them, just direct them into the serious social issues, political issues, presented in a way that they would like to see it. And in addition to that, we'll also make sure that we provide content that related to sports and other issues that they are naturally in gaming, things that they would naturally like to read about. But hand in hand with that, we also filter something about corruption and pollution and things like this. So this is the way we approach Generation Z. And Instagram, we also work with influencers. We introduce a topic that we want them to talk about, and they do it either through YouTube or Instagram, and we open up such issues and cooperate with the Generation Z through these channels. And with journalists, we are traditionally have good cooperation with them. We organize open data trainings for them how to work with data, right? working with data trainings, and that's a traditional activity of metamorphosis that happens throughout the year, regardless if there are projects or not. And that's also something we're very proud of. So the two targets I can think of right now.
So, my experience working with civil society in Kosovo, I've never seen so many experts and directors in my life. And you can have an organization that's full of director experts. And when you want to work with other entities that work in another domain, this is called interdisciplinary cooperation. You need to be willing to not be the expert in order to facilitate the interfacing with your partner. Like, okay, I will acknowledge I am an expert in this, but right now I need to be not the expert so I can navigate these seas that I don't understand just so I can better talk with this person, and this person can also navigate this gray area between our two fields so that we can learn from each other and collaborate. And I find it very difficult for people to step down from their expert pedestal because, you know, it's nice being the expert. But if you truly want interdisciplinary collaboration, you need to be willing to be a student. Right? And because of strong personalities and pride, it's very hard to ask an expert or director, hey, could you step down and be a student for a second so that we can make this collaboration work? So I would say it's very much tied to personalities.
Well, the civil society actually forgot one very good thing, that is to outsource part of their jobs to the journalists. In order to do that and achieve the results you require, as Teresa mentioned, you have to take some time and try to educate the journalists and build the relationship with the journalists, especially in these times and in this area where some of the journalists are working 2 or 3 jobs at a time. So you'll first need to build trust, mutual trust. You have to be there to explain even the dumbest things sometimes. And that's the roots of further cooperation. And please do not forget that journalists are expected to be experts for everything. And of course, they cannot do that. So be there, build relationships so we can outsource and achieve great results in the end. Thank you. And I got a cue from the penultimate participant. What I'm talking about is my personal opinion. I'm not representing my organization.
I think it's very great. It's very, very true insight. I think it's very great, especially those of you who collaborate with journalists. You know the rough deal they have. Any other comments? Questions? Shall we give the closing remarks?
No, it would be me, definitely. The host, but I think it's a good note to end the panel on, and I want to thank you all for the interesting discussion. It was a great pleasure being here. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so I'll stand down here as well. So I think we are going to wrap it up. I want to thank every one of you for taking your day to be here with us and engage in such a fruitful discussions. To the speakers, to our partners from Kosovo, thank you for those 2 amazing additions. To the team of Open Data, of course, very much. To our sponsors and donors, NAT, GIZ, and AU. So I think I'm going to invite Krzysiek and Deta to close it together. Yes. And also, like, it would be great to have like a final group picture with everyone here. And probably we will see each
other again in 2020.
Why probably? I can start as a host. Okay, so just not to make it too long, I think, I just had fun, and I was also telling my panelists that our panel was much more interesting than I expected. And actually, I can say about the whole conference, I mean, I had really big expectations, but it was even better than I expected, so I'm really happy, and I really love the whole spirit that was accompanying us all the time. And I at the end of my panel, I was saying that like we just have to be better people. So rub your back. This is important. I already did that. And just like this small thing, but this is what makes us human beings, I think. And this wasn't actually a collaboration that hurts. It was a good. So this is also what I said, that good collaboration hurts. I think this collaboration between El Paispo and ODK was really smooth. So it's just an exception in this role, but a good one. And I'm sure we're going to meet in 2020. And yeah, that's now it's your turn to wrap up.
It's been an amazing day. I felt like when George was presenting earlier, like it was like a clash of the past and the future and the now of ODK. It's been a really great journey. We were talking earlier like how the organization is growing, like how the people in the organization are being challenged. We are all still young. We don't have a clue most of the time what we are doing. It's very challenging, but it's nice at the same time because we are learning so much. And this conference is also a very inspirational time for us. So I think it boosts us and gives us, motivation to continue stronger in the upcoming months. I would finally thank you all for being here, especially our main partner. Thank you. I mean, it started really smoothly, so I guess Aphrodita is our neighbor. So yeah, of course, the great collaboration of a small city. Yeah, it started really smoothly, so I guess that's why it's continuing like that, and I believe that it will be in the future as well. So see you all in 2020, and let's get all a group picture to finalize this day. Thank you.
I forgot to thank the volunteers.
And the atmosphere. I would like